Yesterday night at the ambassador's home,
Yeah.
you talked to the audience in a very bold way, uh, telling people what is Jewish people and Israel mission in the world. I would
Correct.
like you to share that idea.
Ah,
It's a way to start this conversation.
okay, fine. I came to the ambassador's house and he wanted me to discuss, Mobileye. I was invited there to talk about Mobileye, but the fact of the matter is everybody knows about Mobileye and everybody knows it's a company that's done very well and it's really made Israel famous for science, technology, medicine, and really, like what I said there is that it was a turning point that the world realized that we are the purveyors of science, technology, and medicine. And what I wanted to get the idea across is that all of that, all this innovation and helping the world is really part and parcel of the Jewish people and our mission in the world. And that mission in the world is really to make the world a better place. We call it Tikkun Olam. I also connected it to a very important idea that people sometimes don't hear about, and that's the Messiah. So the Messiah, the Mashiach, it sounds like a very religious idea, but really it's a fundamental idea of humanity that the world is going to be good, that people ultimately will learn to live together, that all of the improvements we're doing in innovation will also help societies to live together, and that ultimately what we want is not only to live a good life materially, but also spiritually and emotionally and sociologically. We want to live in peace, and that peace we call the Mashiach. It's really the hope. It's a hope that is built into our whole psyche of the Jewish people, that the world isn't hopeless and that we shouldn't, like I said today, check out like some philosophers are saying and hand over the world to the machines. No, we believe that this world was created for people to learn to be moral, to learn to be good, to learn to take care of each other, whether it's, like I said, between Jews and Arabs or between Jews and Jews or between countries. That's what the Jewish people is about. And we call that this hope that we really hold out for the world, that we will reach this goal. We call it the Mashiach. At the end of the day, the humanity has to work for this goal, but it's part of our philosophy that we will reach that goal, and that goal will finally be brought about by this great leader who's not only powerful but moral and charismatic and can reason with people to bring them to this ultimate goal. So it's kind of a mix of a divine promise and human effort.
So, do you believe that Judaism is behind this powerful startup nation that we witness every day?
That's an interesting question. I think that, it's sort of like built into our DNA that we are trying to fix the world, whether we do it consciously or subconsciously. It's part of who we are. I mean, you see that with Jews throughout history, that we've been movers and shakers of ideas, and so when you have all the Jews in one country and we're all trying to do this thing, and some of it is really born of necessity. Necessity is the mother of invention. The state of Israel moved forward because they had no choice. We have no resources. We've got a lot of enemies. We're in a difficult neighborhood. And so we've had to develop all kinds of solutions. And those solutions have now been able to be converted into civilian uses, which are helping the whole world.
There is no doubt that Israel and Jewish people is behind the artificial intelligence, behind cybersecurity, behind biotechnology, health, etc. All the fields, and but all these advances are also putting us in a very challenging time. What is next? What is our future? You
Right.
talked the other day. There no be more drivers in the world. So how do we, as Jewish, face these moral ethics dilemmas
The
that
dilemmas.
these technologies are
Right. So,
bringing?
like you mentioned, that there's Jews involved in all these
No.
different technological
Yes.
developments. There are Jews involved in all the ethical approaches to these developments. I give this course on ethics and AI, and I'm just amazed. I just choose ideas. I don't choose people. But it turns out that slide after slide, that some Jew at some point that gave some really important idea. Some religious, some not religious. But we're also at the forefront of thinking about these ethical dilemmas. And I think that really Judaism has a very important role to play in the discussion of these dilemmas, because we've been thinking about ethics for 2,000 years, at least for all of the Gemara, and probably also from before 3,000 years from when we got the Torah. I think that these texts have been dealing with all kinds of problems that we're seeing today. You just need to be able to see the paradigm and apply it to today's problems. And that's a lot of what I'm trying to do. That was what is really at the core of my thesis, and trying to approach humanoid robots. That right now we're all familiar with ChatGPT, and it talks like a person, but there are people that are building robots that look and act like us, and you plug ChatGPT in and now they speak like us. So now you have a humanoid robot, and that's a huge dilemma. We spoke today about a little bit about the dilemma of using them to take care of the elderly, to take care of the young, to be a spouse. Where do you draw the line? Some of, like I said before, I mean, technology, I believe, is helping the world, but they can also do damage. I mean, if you raise your kids by a robot, so then what kind of a parent are you? What kind of a kid did you raise? So all of these things are actually touched upon in Jewish ethics, in Jewish philosophy. It's just a matter of finding the paradigms and applying them.
Mois, when you speak, I mean, you have this credibility from both sides, your technological engineering life, and then your rabbinical, and now your
Philosophy,
PhD.
yeah.
How do you convey to that point?
Like, how did I get there?
Yeah, I mean,
um, I've always sort of lived these two lives, and that's one of the things that I was trying to explain with this Adam 1 and Adam 2, is that we kind of gravitate to one of these atoms more than the other. And I'm more of an engineer, and I spend my whole time like this. No, I'm more of a rabbi, and I really have been trying to bring these two together my whole life, and I've always tried to integrate the two. And I love technology. Like I said before, engineers basically solve puzzles, and I like to solve puzzles. But I'm also very philosophically minded, and I want to know, what am I doing here, right? And so I've really tried to balance my life with that. Sometimes it's more one, sometimes more the other. Sometimes they come together. Really, in today with teaching about AI ethics, they're hand in hand, which is, I feel very fortunate that my life has brought me to this point. Some of it is me trying, and some of it, I believe, is the help of heaven.
I remember you talking in Israel when we first met, and you told that Mobileye started in the very beginning as the promise of a camera, a 3D camera. You received the task,
Yeah.
and you developed a chip.
Correct.
When Toyota took the
The
result,
idea, yeah.
you stayed like empty-handed.
Correct.
And how did you find the new definition for Mobileye, which keeps being the center of?
Right. So, I mean, the fact of the matter is the story with Toyota is really a side story. It's just one, customer. Mobileye was, Amnon Shashua and Ziva Aviram were very smart in the way that they developed the idea and developed I'm basically just one of the engineers that built the system, but Amnon Shashua had this idea that you can detect 3D objects with a single camera, which is the novelty behind Mobileye. And then Ziv had the business idea that it should be made into a chip and not sold as software or in pieces or in ideas. And that really stood us well to move forward. Now that, like you said, it was originally was just to detect 3D objects in 3D space with a single camera. And the application was adaptive cruise control, a very simple feature of a car. But in time, we learn to pivot, meaning we learn to change directions. We learn to see that there are other things we can do. And that brought us all the way to autonomous vehicles with ADAS systems in between. It was almost organic, you might say. No one said, oh, this is what we should be doing. The market slowly told us, and we slowly moved into these areas.
But I remember you saying that you discovered that what you were building at the end
Yeah.
is a safer life for drivers.
Correct.
So you were saving lives.
Correct.
So a full of purpose development.
Right. So so that's definitely was the pivot that we went from developing adaptive cruise control systems to developing safety systems, ADAS systems, was I would say kind of serendipitous. We didn't exactly realize it. Other companies started taking our system that was doing warnings of people identifying objects that you got too close to, pedestrians, cars, and lanes, and just we built this warning system to just try to make some money until our chip was in cars. And it was that moment when insurance companies and safety companies showed us the numbers that we were literally saving lives, that we then pivoted into the whole ADAS area.
We visited the Minister of Transport the other day,
Yeah.
and I was very surprised when he told that he asked a report every day of the casualties.
Correct.
And he asked specifically to divide which accidents were with Mobileye technology or without.
Correct.
And you are doing an amazing service.
Yes.
Okay. But next, what is going to happen with Mobileye in the future? Because now we are receiving the great results for the security of people. But you are proposing that cities will change, our life will change because of autonomous vehicles.
Correct. Right. So, I mean, autonomous vehicles, the primary benefit is saving lives. People kill people in cars by accident. That's why we call them accidents. But nevertheless, they kill 3,400 people a day on the roads in the world. And so autonomous vehicles are going to reduce that number, like we saw, realistically by 90%. But that's not the only impact, because once you stop having people driving, so now all kinds of things in the cityscape begin to change. If you don't have people driving, so now you can have the cars driving as fast as a car can drive. And Audi has a car that drives over 200 kilometers an hour. So if you can drive 200 kilometers an hour, that means you can live much farther from where you work and get there in the same time or less. Traffic will go away. I think that there will have to be super highways for these cars to drive super fast. They can be much narrower. That means they take up less room. They don't need to park in cities, so you don't have to have parking lots. You can convert all of that real estate to human use. In LA, we have huge parking lots that are just big flat spaces, which can be converted to parks or to houses or to other uses for people, not cars. There's many things that we talk about, the airline industry, all these short flights in the United States or even in Europe. You can drive it faster than going through security and checking your bag and getting on the flight and waiting. If you take all that into account, a car driving 200 kilometers an hour will put out of business many short stop flights. And the list goes on.
Yeah, it's amazing. When can we imagine that reality?
Yeah.
How close or how far is that?
Right. So like I only quote different people who are experts in the industry. There's a guy named Bob Lutz from GM who says it's in the next like 10 or 15 years. There's others. Wired magazine says you won't need a driver's license by 2040. There's other people that put it out by 2050. But we're looking between the next 15 to 30 years, there's not going to be humans driving.
Impressive. Completely impressive. So let's switch to AI.
Okay.
We know, I think most of the audience, it's familiar to ChatGPT, for example. So we can ask and receive a good answer.
Correct.
But we know that it's coming much more. Robots taking care of kids or elderly or I don't know, being partners in life.
Correct.
What is that?
What is
humanity in this new perspective?
So I think that, first of all, we need to distinguish between two types of robots. There's the robots that are basically laptops that look like people. They're machines, okay? And they're sophisticated machines driven by machine learning, reinforcement learning, it's artificial intelligence. And we can have a conversation with them. And the big dilemma with having conversations with ChatGPT or robots that look like us is that we know they're machines, so we treat them like machines and we say, give me the answer. But then now I see you and you look just like the machine, and so I say, give me the answer. or bring me my food, right? And so if we don't learn to interact with these humanish like beings like humans, then we may stop acting like humans with real humans. So that's the little problem morally, is that so I actually try to say to ChatGPT, please and thank you. Can you please tell me this, right? I know it's a machine,
It's
right?
kinder when you ask in
Yeah,
that way.
yeah, yeah. So at least, I reinforce this idea that I should try to be a nice person when I interact with people. Otherwise, I begin to act like a machine with everybody. So that's that. Now the flip side of that is then now we start getting into a relationship. I have a relationship with ChatGPT. It's my friend. Oh, I didn't talk to it yesterday. So that's taking it too far. And so we need to try to find this balance where we maintain our moral integrity, but we don't go overboard and become, romantically involved with machines, right? So that's one big question which I've written about in part of my PhD. The other is, what if we build machines that have consciousness? Consciousness basically is that thing that gives us the ability to have pain and pleasure, that we feel, that we experience the world. I'm not a machine. I don't just go through and do things functionally. I go through them what they call phenomenologically, meaning I experience the phenomenon of the world. When I see these Andes mountains covered in snow, I say, wow. Okay, ChatGPT doesn't do that. It could say wow if you say, what do you think about it? But it doesn't feel wow. Okay. And it's that wow that consciousness gives us. Okay. Consciousness is really just the modern word that John Locke in the Enlightenment came up with to replace the word that we've been using for thousands of years, which is called soul. Okay. Everybody before the 17th or 18th century, when they wanted to talk about this experience, this wow, this feeling, they called it the soul. But now, from the Enlightenment time, so people wanted to get away from religion. Soul is a very religious term, so they came up with this thing called consciousness. It doesn't have all the religious baggage, but it's exactly the same thing. Consciousness or soul, it's just two different ways to call the same thing.
Can we get to know a robot feeling?
Right. Okay. So that's the huge question. Okay. Then we get into the philosophical problem, which is called other minds. How do you know that I have a mind? How do you know that I'm conscious, that I have a soul? Right. So religious people say, well, the book says it said that God created all people with a soul. So we have souls, fine. But we don't know if the robot has it or not. Right. And so really people who don't believe in the Torah that says we all have a soul, so they say, I don't, the only reason I think you have a soul, a mind, a consciousness is because you had a mother and a father. I had a mother and father. We have this biological continuity, and you look and act and talk like me. So I figure you've got the same thing going on inside, right? But I'm just guessing. I only know that I have consciousness. I'm guessing. I give you the benefit of the doubt. Okay? So now we go to computers and robots, and so now that's a huge question. How will we know? And I think there's like tens, if not hundreds of tests. Philosophers have written what kind of a test, what kind of a question could we give to somebody to know that they have consciousness or not? And at the end of the day, I read one philosopher's name is Selmar Bringjord. He said, only God knows. At the end of the day, there's no test. There's no real test that we can know. But there are groups building conscious machines. There's in 2020, an article was put out, a survey. 72 labs around the world are trying to build conscious machines. So on the one hand, that's very interesting. And if we could get a conscious machine, wow, it could do things that conscious people can do. On the other hand, if we build a machine with consciousness that I say is a soul and get it to do what we want it to do, I just built a slave. And we all know that slavery is not a good thing. And so that's a big problem. And so now a lot of people say, okay, you can't build a conscious machine to do your work, but you could do it to be your husband. You could build one to be your kid. But then there's a lot of problems with doing that as well, because you know now that you've built this thing, why are you building it, and why are you making it to do what you? I mean, at the end of the day, it's still you've just made a human being in a different form, And so I argue that really we should be making human beings the old-fashioned
I mean, there is something with pride.
way.
When you say we can build, why to build humans in that way? Let's
Yeah,
do it the
the
regular or old
old-fashioned way.
fashioned. There is something very, I say, pride, like we
Yeah,
become God
very good.
somehow.
Yes, very
And
good.
it,
That's 100% right. So a lot of people are talking about the fact that we want to do it because we could do it, and let's show that we can do everything, right? We can become like God. So in my thesis, I use the paradigm of the golem. Okay, and
uh,
the golem, um, whether it's the Middle Age stories of the golem or there's actually a golem in the Talmud itself. That Rava Bara Gavra, that there was a big rabbi and he created a humanoid, a Gavra, a golem, and it didn't go well. It's never gone well. And I
Frankenstein,
argue, yeah, huh?
Frankenstein.
Exactly, and I've argued even if it wasn't. I mean, they say that Frankenstein was taken from the Golem stories, but in any case, what I argue is that Jewish literature provides us with this paradigm of this golem, and it doesn't come out well. Judaism is not as opposed to what I said that Judaism is very pro technology and trying to advance the world. It doesn't look well on the golem, and so I argue that from a Jewish perspective, we shouldn't be building conscious robots.
I think we have to wrap up
Yeah,
and finishing this conversation. Maybe last message. I'm thinking who is going to hear us.
yeah,
Okay, I imagine Chilean Jewish people or non-Jewish people listening to you, and watching you as a successful scientist, engineer, successful in business, and also with this spiritual development. How can people develop this both sides and become an, let's say, a balanced
balance.
human
Yeah,
being?
yeah. So I think that the way I did it was I lived by this principle. It's called Kovea Itim La Torah. We're supposed to fix every day some time to learn some philosophy. And so, you should always try to go to classes and learn, but you should also have some fixed time. This is what I do. Today at lunch, I learn a page of this book, or today I read these things, or something, I do it for 5 minutes, I do it for an hour, but every day. And so I've always tried to integrate into my life the philosophical side while I'm also still doing the technological business side. And it's a matter of will. You have to try to balance your life. And it's hard because now I'm focused on this, right? But I think that that's this challenge of what Rav Soloveitchik called self-confrontation, of trying to integrate Adam 1 and Adam 2, the business entrepreneur, engineer, scientist, doctor, conquering the world and making the world a better place, and also the spiritual side, the philosophical side, the ethical side, trying to integrate that and really have a whole life instead of a half a life.
Mois, last question.
Yeah.
How did you find Chile? And what was your expectation?
Right. So I found Chile actually, and as a matter of fact, many Latin American countries through Conexión, which is a group that's based in Israel and connects the Spanish-speaking world to Israel, and they bring all kinds of groups. And actually, your group was one of those groups, and that's how I met you. I actually had already met many groups from Chile. There were senators, congressmen, and many of them asked me to come to Chile, and I said, "Great." And that was the end of the conversation. And so you're the only person that when you said, come to Chile, and I said, great. And you said, okay, you're coming. And that's how I got here. So
Was Chile
you.
what you expected?
No.
Better or worse?
Much nicer, much nicer.
Great. Thank you so much.